Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the musician, songwriter, producer and sound artist. It is Paul Statham, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. He's worked with such people as Dido and co-wrote Here With Me, but he's also part of Pete Murphy's band, The 100 Men, who recorded such classic singles as Cuts You Up, All Night Long, Indigo Eyes, and has continued to work in music ever since, and he's also a lecturer. Anyway, you're going to find out much more about Paul within this interview. So all I want you to do is sit back, relax, and enjoy the next 60 minutes. After several minutes of casual chat that I edited out, we got down to that very exciting subject that was the early formative years. Paul, it's over to you.
For me, well, I'm just a couple of years older than you, so I was formed B-movie at school with Steve Hovington and Graham, the drummer. We're still going, actually. We're back together with just recorded some new stuff today. I mixed a new song for us today, actually. So my musical awakening would be T-Rex, would be early Mark Bolan. I was fanatic for him from 11 years old. The minute I heard Ride a White Swan, actually.
Right. Yes.
And then not so much. I was just obsessed only with him. I didn't like I liked a bit of the glam. I liked I hated the sweet. I didn't get Slade, although I bought Slade Alive, as everybody else did, the live album. But then quickly, my cousin, a little bit older, had a gramophone, and I would sneak in, and he had Bowie's albums, and he had Roxy Music album with the two girls, Amanda Lear, I think, on the front. So I was more obsessed with the fact that two semi-naked girls were on the front of this album. So I would periodically steal that album, and I think it was Man Who Sold the World he might have had, and Slider by T-Rex and stuff like that. Maybe it was a Ziggy Stardust album, and I just became immersed in it. Yeah. I became obsessed with the music, the texture. Bowie turned me on to texture. Mark Bolan was a really weird one. It's all a bit sing-along, very guitar-y. But when I heard Bowie, and then I heard Another Green World when I was 14, it'd be 1975 when it came out, by Brian Eno. And that was the album that flipped me. That was an album that I remember seeing these worlds, these kind of alternate worlds that Eno created sonically. And I've read interviews where that was his intention. He wanted to create a world that was similar to this, or almost lied next to it. There's a very abstract world. And I remember almost listening to it, and I would make pictures of the textures, and I would make images of what I thought each instrument was in colour. I'd make colour charts of albums, and just became obsessed with that. And then the punk thing came along, and that was it. I lived in a small mining town, so it was parents were getting divorced. It was a horrible time. The 70s weren't nice at all. I didn't find them very nice. It was quite a violent decade, to be honest. And the miners and all this sort of stuff. I just caught up in all of that and that small town madness. We just used to rehearse above a pub and thrash away. It just seemed to be a way out. Yeah. That kind of moved on once we heard Ultravox. Really, Ultravox's first album, produced by Eno actually, and then Magazine. And the weirdest thing was going to see Bauhaus supported Magazine at the Agenti Theatre in Derby, and being completely freaked out by Peter Murphy. He had this body stocking and he was like leering at the audience. I thought, whoa, man. I was fascinated by him, but equally a little bit terrified. And then listening to Magazine came on. They did The Light Pours Out of Me. And I think it was The Light Pours Out of Me. It was, yeah. And then roll forward, 10 years or 12 years, and there I am on stage with Peter Murphy. playing The Light Pours Out of Me to a fucking sold out show somewhere in the middle of the States. And it was just a surreal moment in my mind. I just went, what? And literally the same year, I again went back to see Magazine, this time supported by Simple Minds. I became obsessed with Simple Minds' first album. I absolutely loved it. It still gives me a weird feeling when I hear it. This sort of energy of Roxy Music and these really weird. It's not it's probably their worst album, but Life in a Day. But that actual song, Life in a Day, was the first ever keyboard. I learned to play the keyboard on it, which shows the oldest. Whatever that was, kind of work that out, and then roll on. A few years not far from now, I have Jim in this studio, in this little studio here. I'm working with Jim Kerr, and I'm going, Peter Murphy Magazine, Jim Kerr. It's like, wow. If I could have gone back and told my younger self, would I have said anything, or would I have just said, just keep going?
Just keep going, it might happen. So with being in a mining town, obviously in the early 80s, Thatcher got in 79, then we had that kind of the Falkland War and crisis, and then we had the miners' strike, which was kind of horrendous. And then, there was the whole Red Wedge and Socialist Workers' Party. So were you kind of getting emotionally sort of caught up in that kind of...
Yeah, my house backed onto the actual picket line. So I would come stumbling in from nightclubs at 4 o'clock in the morning, because I moved back home from London about 1982. I've been in London a couple of years with B-Movie, because we came to London, we signed to London Records fairly quickly, and we released Remembrance Day and Nowhere Girl and Marilyn Dreams, which we did really, and we were groomed for success, really. We thought it was going to happen. We supported Duran Duran on their first tour, and then it just impacted. We sacked our drummer, Graham, we were all the original line back together. Then our keyboard player left, and then an endless succession of... By 1983, it was just awful, like a facsimile of the original band. So I couldn't afford to stay in London, so I ended up moving back to the mining village. And, every morning you'd hear scab, the sound of them throwing bricks at the bus as it went past my house.
Oh my God, that must have been horrendous.
Yeah, and I had friends whose fathers, there's a couple of people's fathers committed suicide because they broke they went into work, and then in a small village like that, your life is never going to be the same. You're going to be ostracized forever, as is all your family. So there's a lot of tragedy, and the queue, the kind of like where they go and collect their money, their £3 a day, was also at the bottom of my street. So because my house backed onto the miners' welfare. So that was sort of their meeting point, where they gather in the morning to either brick the boss as it went up the hill to the pit, or to collect their soup money, the £3 a day. And my family were all miners. My dad was a miner back in the day. He was an electrician down the pit. So as were my uncles and all sorts of stuff. So I've seen the devastation that does. That village is just dead now. My mum still lives there. And it's boarded up, and it never really recovered at all. And that to me was like interesting, that the new romantic, I think a lot of working class bands came out of the new romantic things and invented this world of a very colourful world for themselves.
Yeah.
Because the 70s was so grim.
It wasn't good. I remember sort of having this, we used to have and you probably did as well, where you'd have a timetable of the electricity being cut off during the week. And you'd have, it was like...
Oh, no, it was just such a different world, but it was, it's fun. The music was vibrant. I loved the start of I loved hooking up with Steve-O at the start of the 80s, and him becoming our manager, signing to Some Bizarre, releasing our indie stuff. It was happy times as well, recording in tiny little studios, seeing us being interviewed by Sounds and NME, and touring America for the first time.
And what was your dad's response to your sort of musical?
Oh, I hated it. He burst into the house and threw me over his car bonnet when I told him I was leaving, bailing out of school. I didn't want a job. I was going to be in a band. No, not good. Not good.
God. Jesus, that must.
But that necessitated a a very focused state of mind, and he was pretty good actually. He came around really quickly. He's like,
Right.
right, I can tell that. Look, if you're going to be in a band, you need some gear. If you're going to buy gear, you need a job. If you're not going into school, he helped me get a job, and he helped me buy a guitar and a proper amp, and you know, there's lots of thievery going on at the time, so gear would come and go from various places. You'd find it in your rehearsal studio by some other ne'er-do-wells. It was just a weird time, but
Yes.
it
Because
came.
a lot of bands that I've interviewed from that period, I mean, because being young during that early 80s, there was kind of a bit of a hopelessness, there was a feeling of like, well, actually, we're not going to, there's nothing for us. We've had the 70s, the 80s isn't looking much better, because
Yeah,
you either went towards the kind of the mainstream oh God, Trevor Horn production, the Spandau Ballet and that
yeah,
world, or you weren't part of that world, which always felt a little bit like you were going to be a part of the Thatcher's children, or you went to the other side, which basically meant there was no future. So there was a lot of unemployment, and there was all those schemes like the Job Seekers Allowance and Enterprise.
yes. My mate who got out of prison set up a little recording studio in the old pit baths, where I would spend many really drunken nights just jamming out and stuff like. It was a really mixed up time, to be honest. I don't. It was part fun, it was part horrible, but youth makes everything. You put a youthful spin on everything, really. When you're young, you're young. There was a load of great music around. It was particularly culturally hostile place, politically hostile, but music wise, you're coming out of punk and reggae and disco and budding electronica and you've got all this kind of people getting very passionate about music.
Yes, well, I realised with most of these indie bands, there were so many of them during that period, there was not really much else to do. So I think most people did sort
Mm.
of um, you know,
Every band had a town. And then when the thing with punk, it burned itself out so quickly that people were left scratching their heads like me. It's like, that came and went, but it left a residue of great little indie labels. The do-it-yourself ethos was still in place, and
yes,
punk pretty much transformed into post-punk quite quickly for me. You find Warsaw became Joy Division. You find that every member of a post-punk band was in a punk band.
yeah,
So it was just exciting to get a keyboard player. When we got Rick Holiday into our band, it was suddenly we could sound like our heroes. Um, and pretty soon we were signed and we released stuff, and Nowhere Girls did well enough, but not well enough to become a hit.
yes, absolutely. So then, sort of, because there was the post-punk, and then obviously there had been that electronic new romantic phase, and all the Blitz kids that
Mm.
everybody went to if you felt part of the beautiful people. But then there was, like I said, the SWP part, side of life, and Red Wedge. So
Yes.
the indie world sort of suddenly sort of sprouted up, and obviously when the Smiths appeared in '83, they would definitely felt like a chapter was starting there, because we'd had a few bands like you mentioned, Simple Minds, and there'd been U2, Julian Cope, and those sort of bands, who Echo and the Bunnymen. But then when
Mm.
Morrissey and Marr appeared in '83, there was like for 5 years they were this kind of big chapter. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, that
there was.
was there was U2 as well, obviously, but
But there was that whole postcard scene. There's a whole Orange Juice, Aztec Camera, you know, that scene. I think a lot of great things came out of the around the time of the Smiths. The being intelligent and political seemed to come out of this early hedonism of the new romantics, which seemed to be a sort of echo of Thatcher, if you like, the kind of the Duran Duran and Spandau Ballet. In some essences, there was a lot. There was, we're self-made men. We have companies. We're businessmen as well as musicians. It's a really weird sort of the BAF, British Electronic Foundation. Setting up themselves as a company, and
yes.
it's sort of vast amounts of money being generated. International hit records
Well, I
and
suppose, yeah. I
exclusive,
mean, there was
including a lot
definitely
of
a
people.
bit of a spirit, because you had sort of people like Alan McGee with Creation Records, who had started a fanzine, and he'd had that little club in London, didn't he? The living room, or the room at the
Yeah,
top
yeah,
upstairs. And then yeah, you mentioned Postcards, and there was 53rd and Third Records, and then the Pink label, which was a tiny label really. But there was like, there was a lot
You know,
of,
Rough Trade. I think the Smiths were on Rough Trade.
there was
Jeff Travis and these kind of more earnest, if you like, more intellectual people with a political conscience as well. I think it just became it began to relate back to real people again, where the New Romantics very quickly became, you looked up at the New Romantics. They kind of recreated their Bowie idols, where they wanted to be seen to be the ones on stage. Lots of, we're the stars. I kind of think it propagated a sort of a star system, really.
yeah. Well, they wanted
You
to be.
had
I
to
think
you use videos where nobody from accounts could ever afford to visit in their lives.
yes. Well, I think you had the John Taylor kind of, that kind of vibe of wanting to be in a limousine or being on the tube with Paula Yates, in a bed, being, don't you, sort of having beautiful models, and for geeky people like me, there was never, ever going to be a yacht in Barbados.
A yacht in my backyard.
There
But
might be there might be a rubber dinghy, but there was no
you know,
yacht. There was no dream of a yacht or,
I think
big.
the indie thing brought real people, brought it back to real people again. The Smiths seem to echo their audience.
And there was people like Glass Records who'd also, like, was it Dave Barker, who also had that label with people like the Jazz Butcher
Yeah,
and I think early
in
Gothic.
fact, I've just been working with David J. Bauhaus bass
Yes.
player. He's the new vocalist on my Dark Flowers new EP. Peter Murphy was on the first album. Don't know how this is going down well in Bauhaus world. But yeah,
Yes. I can't remember where. Yeah, there's been a
Pat
bit
Fish
sad.
was the jazz busher.
Yes, Pat Fish. I mean, and then you had people like Momus, these very sort of, and
Yeah, I was so intrigued by him.
yes,
It's
I didn't.
really strange, kind of electro, weird, Bowie type of figure.
Slightly perverted lyrics.
Yeah, and then you had, Lawrence from Denim and Felt, and you've got. I'm dying to see that documentary, which has never been. Lawrence from Belgravia. It's a great title, pun that is. I really love it. But there's a great documentary. I'd love to see it. It was produced, but it was never released. You've not been able to see it.
Oh, that's a shame. Did you, just as a brief one, did you see the one on Robert Lloyd and the Nightingales recently, King Robert?
No,
That
no.
just came out. Blow your mind. It's kind of beyond anything you've ever imagined. But again, there's an artist who started with the Prefects in the late 70s, became the Nightingales, but then there was a bit where he sort of like says, this is where I used to sleep, in the back of a garage kind of area, sort of as a homeless person for a while. And it was just it's just like this kind of a person who just kept going and has still survived today.
India is a difficult thing to define, really. It's a very, although I think it really kind of rose, as you say, around 1983 properly, and seen you became an indie band rather than a post-punk band or a goth band, or it was there was a huge scene
Yeah.
of
Well,
cultural scene that developed.
I didn't realize there was that whole neo psychedelic kind of world with people like the Direct Hits and Mood Six and all these other bands, which again, that whole world slightly passed me by, as well as the goth scene. Apart from, I mean, obviously there was the Cure and the Cult and Sisters of
Mm.
Mercy, who the Cure I like. The other,
In the post-punk world, I used to like the Yachts and Monochrome Set and bands like this, who mind this more sort of wiry sonic aesthetic that I actually really liked.
well, the Yachts became, or one of the members is It's Immaterial, isn't he?
Yes, yeah. But I remember their B movies. Drummer Graham used to love. He was such a great. He was quite politically aware, Graham, and he still is a staunch Labour supporter. And he always had really good taste in the more political, like the Gang of Four. It's through him that I've got their first EP. That's Entertainment, I think it was called, or whatever it's called. And I love the Gang of Four. Supported them at the Days of Future Past festival in Leeds. Very powerful band.
Scary scary individuals, I would imagine. So then, how did
Yes,
you? I know. Well, I don't know what they're like now. I mean, we're all a bit sort of crocked, really, aren't we?
I
With
think they're all dead, most of them. I know Andy Gill's dead, the guitarist. He died a
recently,
few
didn't he?
recently, yeah.
Yeah. So, what was your kind of path? Because then, because in a simplistic way, for me, the indie world was kind of 83 to 87, which was the years of the Smiths. They broke up.
Mm.
Ecstasy comes along. There's kind of like suddenly
Yeah,
the
yeah.
16 to 18-year-old wanted a different sound, didn't they? They wanted that kind of, they were different to the 16 to 18-year-olds before that, and I think each generation wants their kind of Billie Eilish or Taylor Swift or
Yeah, yeah. I had this period of horror, the horror. I think we all have a horror period, and it was like the B movie thing took me out of my working class town, showed me that, gave us as a record deal, took us to tour far away places, then snatched it away fairly quickly. And I found myself going back to London in 1984 and living in horrible things with Steve from B Movie, trying desperately to tag something else together, and it not working. I thought, this is awful. This has got to be the end of it all. I ended up tiling bathroom floors for my landlord because I couldn't even afford the 50p for the meter. So it's like, I can't keep giving you money for my own meter. You have to work for me. And then suddenly my old agent, Paul Boswell from the agency, called and said, look, Peter Murphy from Bauhaus is looking to put a live band together. Send him anything that you've got. And I got the audition for it, 1986. 1985, end of 1985, or early 86. And I got the gig, just promoting his first album, Should the World Fall Apart. That was the embryonic 100 Men, actually, because we put together Pete Bonus, my mate, Eddie Branch, and Turl was drumming, and I was playing guitar, and Howard Hughes, his co-writer on Should the World Fall Apart, had been in the Associates and was now working with Peter. And then Howard one day said to me, he'd heard the B Movie album, he said, you can write songs. I'm leaving. I don't want to stay here with the Peter Murphy setup. And I was the last one to be allowed to join the band. I wasn't a very good musician, but I could play a bit of keyboard, some guitar. And I was never told, it was always, yeah, we'll keep you on a bit longer, And then I became very quickly Peter's co-writer because no one else in the band were really songwriters.
yes. And did you? I mean, because I did an interview with is it Alan White, who suddenly found himself in all these kind of rockabilly bands, who and others,
Well, Alan White used to work at Rockmaster's studio,
Oh right.
and he used to listen. We demoed. Funny enough, yeah, because he was working at Rockmaster studio when I was writing with Peter Murphy, because Peter was managed by the guy who owned Rockmasters, and I think he was a T-boy at the studio. He was
Right.
a rockabilly guitarist.
That's right. And then, he sort of, yeah, again, it was a bit like that Ava Cherry. It was like, how did you get the gig with Morrissey? And it was a bit
Yeah,
like,
he ended up
well, it
with.
was a bit like, well, Morrissey wanted a photo shoot and he said, look, I want some rockabilly people. And it's like, oh, we've got this band, they're just going to stand in the background and look a bit, as Morrissey likes his, you
Mm.
know, trying to be,
Yeah. He
looking a
liked
bit
his.
like, yes, slightly, men with a flick knife, but sort of, yeah, a
He has a
certain
penchant for a certain look.
being really diplomatic there. So, it's like, and then it's like, oh yeah, by the way, they can also play a bit of music as well. And it's a bit like, okay. So it was kind of a weird way that he suddenly, and then you just wrote 90 songs with Morrissey. How did you, it was like, God, that's an incredible gig or
Yeah,
something.
Peter Murphy turned out to be incredibly nice at first. I loved, I was the only one who lived in London as well. The rest of the 100 Men didn't. And so I would go around to he had a lovely apartment and a lovely wife, Behan, and he was like, look, I need to do a follow-up album. I went to America with him to tour the Should the World Fail to Fall Apart album, and it was great fun, and I was back. So what basically that did, Peter Murphy focused on America, and we did so many American tours. The whole Ecstasy thing and House completely bypassed me. I was sharing a house with a guy who played in the Bolshoi, who supported us on tour and got me somewhere to live in London. And the whole thing, everybody else in the house was getting into Ecstasy and Acid House. And I made a absolutely deliberate thing. I didn't want to do that. Everybody's coming back tripping and high, and I thought, right, I've been given a second chance with Murphy here. I'm allowed to be so creative. He said, just come to my house, write anything. He would lock me in his little attic with a 4-track, and I'd make weird music of little marimbas and goth guitars, and it was just like, and I was getting paid a retainer from him, and there was tours being lined up, and I totally admired him as a frontman.
And
I
also,
thought, this
you were
guy,
working with people like Pete. Is it Peter Bonis? Who,
yeah, Pete Bonus was an amazing guitarist.
whose CV is quite extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, Pete's one of my best friends still. He's an old gypsy man. He was brought up in a gypsy caravan where Jim Capaldi, Traffic Girl, you know, he was a legendary 70s guitar player. And live, it was such a great band. But you know, it was Peter Murphy. It was never your deal. I had a
Yeah.
slightly better deal because I was writing the songs with him.
So did you? I mean, because at that stage, obviously, you know, if we were looking back, it's one thing, but at the time he'd had the Bauhaus, where he'd obviously had to become this character and become a person that he might not have even recognized from the beginning, and
Yeah,
have that drama, as every band does. They have that 5 years of being in the band and the drama. Normally, you know, what I found from these interviews is that, you know, like you have the 18-month honeymoon, you get this sort of John Peel session, first album, all those little
yeah.
tours, in the bigger tours, then the tricky second album. And if any band ever tours America, that seems to kind of finishes them off as well. And the sort of the fact that everyone hates each other and there's no money is kind of enough to
Well,
destroy.
it didn't for us because he went from selling like 20,000 albums on Should the World Fail to Part and us playing very small clubs to the second album, Love Hysteria. I actually wrote the 3 singles, All Night Long, Indigo Eyes, and I think there's another one for what it was. And that album then sold 5 times as many. So he'd sold 100,000 albums with Love Hysteria, and we suddenly bumped up. We suddenly sold out 2,000 clubs. So there was a fair amount of money, you know. We did have the big touring buses, and the band were keen, and the band were all great mates. We all got on, and Peter was great at that point as well. It was great. And then Deep, the next album, I wrote all of it with him, and Cuts You Up became a big hit for him, and
Yes. So what
all
was
of
the
us.
because that's one of the great singles, isn't it? Let's face it. That's probably, for me, it's, you know, one of the great songs he's ever, you know, his vocal is incredible, and the song just is there's nothing wasted in that song, is there? It's just such a delight. From that moment you start hearing it,
Bah!
you have to listen to the whole thing.
Remember it? Yeah, and I remember writing it on the guitar, on the acoustic guitar, just in my bed in Peckham, just the chords of. And playing it and making a little demo for Pete at Rockmaster Studios, where Alan White was creeping around as a T-boy there. And Simon Rogers coming in to produce the album and making this amazing album of 7 songs. And I just thought this album is, because we had our difficulties later on. We had a lot of co-writing issues on money and things like that, so a lot of bands do. But I'll always be eternally grateful for him because he gave me complete and utter freedom in what I wrote. He would take anything I wrote, from a synth line electro demo to an acoustic guitar demo to my Iggy and the Stooges kind of rock demos to a more esoteric marimbas and string pads demo, and he would work his kind of goth magic on it, and he would take my smallest idea and make it great, or he would take a full backing track and add something amazing to it. And that was great, and Cut You Up did really well. And when we toured America with that album, and Deep started to edge its way into the top 40, we got screaming girls at the front, and it was like goth Beatlemania. It was just, and we started to stay in really nice hotels and da da da. But the result was, when we came back from that tour, Peter didn't. He sort of backed away from it a little bit. He disappeared to Turkey, married Beyan, and he said, I'm going away for 2 years. And And then we did the next album, Holy Smoke. It was a horrible mismatch, wrong producer. It was actually Mike Thorne who produced B-Movie, who was in Wire, but it just didn't work for me sonically, and the songs were all over the place, and a little bit of this, and a little bit, it was very, very unfocused. And then he sacked the band after that and kept me on, and I wrote, again, I then went back and wrote all the music for Cascade. I met Pascal Gabriel.
And that's, but it's interesting that the role of the producer, did he become Mike Thorne? Was his kind of direction or energy, was that just a difficult dynamic with the band?
Yeah, it wasn't a very good dynamic at all. It was, I don't know, I think he had this synclavier system that I remember him having from B-Movie and Soft Cell. And it was like, oh, don't worry, everything's going to go through this fantastic machine. And the band was sort of sidelined in the writing. They were bought. I went to New York with Peter to work with just Mike Thorne, and then the band were brought in much later, and it was like a wrong way round. You know, normally we work things up as the band, and then all these extra toys and things come on after, and it was all very disjointed. And Peter wasn't. I think the song, basically the root of it all was we didn't spend enough time on writing great songs.
Yes, but then you toured the album. Did you sort of get the song?
Diminishing returns.
Did that become?
The big places we were playing on Deep were suddenly halved, and they were half as full, or the gigs were downgraded, and it was already, we thought, wow, that was a quick rise up.
Oh, God.
This is going down the other side of the hill.
Yes, that is quite strange, isn't it?
And then when he sacked the band, who were my best friends, and he said, I can't keep them on any kind of retainer anymore, and I just didn't know what to do. I just had a young child, and I was kind of desperate to have any sort of income, so they carried on paying me a little bit to write more songs for him, and I wrote all of Cascade, all the music I wrote on Cascade, all of it. I went to Spain with him, and Pascal came in, Pascal Gabriel, and that's where my life changed again. Pascal Gabriel was at that time was fantastic. He was breath of fresh air. He was fun. He recognised what my contribution was, and he was like, "Well, this is all wrong. You're playing everything, and yet you're being treated like you're being treated less than the kind of doorman who, you know." And he was like, "No, you have to get out of this situation."
Yes. But there's just on that album, Cascade, there is the Scarlet Thing in You. Can you remember that coming together? Because
because I wrote Scarlet Thing in You. Funnily enough, I wrote it while we were recording Deep. Years before that, and I put it on I set a huge 4-track system up in the Wool Hall. So this was 2 albums before Cascade, and I made a really comprehensive demo of it, and it just got put on a shelf somewhere. And to me, it still sounds unfinished. It still sounds like an unfinished song. I saw you, you saw me. It's like never really.
Because I suppose in a way, I think musically it's fantastic. So that's the one thing that I've always, it just has that kind of dynamicness.
Such energy. Such an energy in that song.
And it's
the
kind
drummer,
a bit like some of Johnny Marr's stuff in the Smiths. It has that, actually, this kind of, all the chords all sort of flowing, same with
exactly that. That's my exact feeling when I wrote it. I thought, this has got I love some of the chord changes in it and the riff. I thought, this starts and it flows all the way to the end really well. And then we got some Pascal, got some great musicians in. We recorded it in Spain at Trevor Morace's studio. And the drummer, and Pete was away when we did that. He'd gone back to Turkey, and we had such fun. And I think it comes out in the music. And Kevin Armstrong came and played guitar.
Right.
He doubled up the riff, and we had Michael Brook come in and do some experimental guitar on the solo on the Scarlet Thing in You, who'd been recording with Eno, and Eno's producer, the Canadian guy Daniel Lenoir, and all that sort of stuff. And then Peter came back and hated it. He's like, what the fuck are those drums? He's fucking clattering around all over the place. And then Pascal said, well, I'm not changing it. He's gone. He's a second musician. So they stayed, and I think he grew to love it actually. Because live, it was absolutely brilliant.
Yes, God. So did you tour that album at all?
No, basically, well, an off-the-record story was they were really treating me very badly. Peter and this crooked manager, they reduced my publishing to 20% for writing all the music, and were taking 80% for the lyrics. They paid me £100 a week, which they then said they were going to take back from any advance that I got. He tried to steal some money, the manager did, and I only found out half my advance had been put in his own bank account, and he'd ripped the advance, the sheet out from the publishing deal and substituted in a half amount. I got a young child. I had tried desperately hard to get my hands on this money that was due to me, and there was this tour lineup to promote that album. And Pascal Gabriel at the time came round. He's like, Paul, you've got to get you out of this situation. He said, look, Daniel Miller is a friend of mine. Why don't me and you put together an electro-pop trio? We'll call it Peach or Neuronic, and I have some great studio. And he was really, and he gave me the keys to this amazing studio full of synths. He'd just come off the back of doing New Order and the Inspiral Carpets, and he'd done Bomb the Bass and S Express. That was all Pascal as well. And this new guy was a joy, and we became top mates. And he was saying, you have to leave Peter. Are you leaving Peter? I was like, no, I can't. I'm still getting me £100 a week, and I promised I'd do this tour. And it's the only way I'm going to get my money out of them that they owe me. And in the end, we devised a plan. And I said to Peter's manager, give me the money you owe me. And as you're such a great person, I'll do the tour for free. And he went, oh, this guy's so stupid. Here's the money that I owe you anyway, which I wasn't going to give you. Now you'll do the tour for free. Then I rang them up and said, fuck off. Get somebody else to do the tour. Went to Mute with Pascal Gabriel, walked in, saw Daniel Miller, who I loved, because he came to see B-Movie play in 1982 when we supported, Fad Gadget supported us at a small festival. And Daniel, we played Daniel 2 tracks. And we sang, we didn't even have a singer, just me and Pascal. We sang our ideas for this big sort of Bacharach kind of 60s idea of a band that we had doing it all on synths. And Dan just said, love it. Here's a deal. Called upstairs, got us 2 checks each for 15 grand each.
Wow.
And we walked out the office with a record deal that I don't think we ever signed. We never really signed the finished thing. And then Pascal was like, see, I told you. And I was like, what? So my life just spun on its axis immediately, and I threw myself into this Peach thing. And then we dropped the song. Our first single went into the film Sliding Doors, and then went on to become a big American hit. The top 20 hit on my own was. And although it didn't do the same over here. And then Warner Chappell's came knocking on my door and said, look, we want to sign you, we want to sign Pascal, we love the Peach thing, we loved your Peter Murphy stuff, we think you and Pascal together you could write songs for other people, and then of course we get to the end of the Peach thing and Pascal decides he doesn't like the singer. The singer Lisa is a nightmare. The whole thing implodes after one album. And I thought, fucking hell, yet again. The third time, I'm not even 27 yet. I mean, I was actually a lot older than that at the point. I'd be 33. But it's snatched away again. And what am I going to do now? And then I met Dido, and who was the secretary. I wrote 4 songs with her. And Here With Me went on to become her first single, and No Angel went on to go on her album, and she sold 23 million albums. And
hell. God, that's, yes, the Dido connection.
That bought me an awful amount of money to buy a house, and and to still remain signed to Warner Chappell's today, 25 years later. I continued to write with Pascal, became a great friend. We wrote with Dot Allison and Shara Nelson but then again, Pascal just suddenly turned around one day and said, I want to work with somebody else, Paul. I don't want to work with you anymore. not in a nasty way. I think he was going through some personal stuff, and I was heading for a divorce and the whole. But the point was, I'd thought, right, by almost 40, I think I found my feet a little bit.
Yes. Dad, were you on the Dido front when you sort of, recorded that, those singles? Did you
Yes.
sort of have any idea on what was going to happen? Did you think,
No. My publisher, Mike Salt, at the time, who became one of my best friends, did say when he heard Here With Me, that's your career song. And I just laughed it off and went home. And we wrote 4 or 5 songs, and I think the 2 of them were just as good. And but I think Sister Bliss heard one of them, and that all of Rollo, all of Faithless by that time were trying to get their songs on the album as well, and it was all getting, hold on, this looks like it's going to be quite interesting. And luckily, getting 2 songs on that album was great. It really, seriously. And then I went to work with Kylie Minogue on a Fever album, with one we Can't Get You Out of My Head on, and we got 2 tracks on that album. And those were the days where as you'd get paid as a songwriter, not streaming, but per CD sold. So Fever sold 7 million albums. So on those 2 albums, I'd done 30 million albums.
life? That was a bit of a turnaround, wasn't it? Because I was talking to the guy from the Bluebells who you did that
Young at Heart.
Young at Heart, which then they go to court, don't they, because of Bobby, is it Valentino with his little fiddle play?
Yeah, you got to be careful.
You got to be careful. But he said that he's a bit of a, a songwriter for hire. And I sort of said, about the process of that. And he said that, what he has in his mind is like, right, I've got to go and write this song. So he gives himself a deadline, thinking, yeah, before I leave for the airport, I'll write the song. And then he thinks, well, when I'm going to the airport, I'll write the song. Then when I'm on the plane, I'll write the song. Then it's like, shit, I'm literally going into the studio.
Sorry, just stop this phone ringing. Magnus Fines calling from America. Let me decline. That's Magnus, who I there's another story now. That's Magnus produced the Dot Allison single that I wrote with Pascal.
Oh,
song called Close Your Eyes, which became her first single for Eastaugh. But Magnus, that's when I first met Magnus, back then in the night when I wrote the time, maybe early 2000s. And that he's now become another musical inspiration, really. So that where were we? We were talking about the songwriter for hire. Yeah, I slipped into that with Warner's again with diminishing returns, but I enjoyed the process, and I still do. I wrote Matt Cardle's single "It's Only Love." I wrote the Saturdays "Why Me Why Now" for their first album. I did Tina Arena song on which went double platinum in America. I just wrote with weird people, Emma Bunton and Jerry Halliwell and just all Sophie Alice Bector was lovely, and Will Young and all these people, and I just found, oh man, this is not Brian Eno.
Yes.
This needs a sea change. So I just started doing music for installations with sculptors. I met a great guy at my daughter's school who was a curator, put on exhibitions in Italy and with some great painters and sculptors. And he was a real fucking crazy guy, lovely, with 3 kids. But he'd just suddenly go, Paul, you should come to Italy tomorrow. I'd say, yeah, and I'd just go. And I met some fantastic people, and I never got any money for it, but I did a lot of installation work with galleries and painters. And I just thought, oh man, right, okay, I can do the songwriting thing, provided I can do this as well. I found this balance and all of a sudden I found balance, and I thought, be thankful. I was so panicked about money, anxiety, I think, for a working class background as well. I was always permanently worried about, this is not a proper job. You're never going to have, when do you get a proper job? Even after the Dido, my dad's like, well, yeah, but you need to when are you going to get a job then? And it's like, fucking hell, it's never ending. It's never going to end unless I end it, unless I reconcile something in my mind, So I did. I just became extremely grateful for what I'd achieved, and had a long talk with myself and thought, look, Jim Kerr is a personal friend. How cool is that? How cool would you have this conversation with your 17-year-old that you can pick up the phone? Because Jim is such a lovely guy. That came about as well by by me wanting to do a project called the Dark Flowers. And I got guest vocalist in, based on a book by Sam Shepard, Motel Chronicles. And my manager at the time knew Jim Kerr's manager, and I said, well, I'd love to get Jim Kerr involved. And she said, well, this guy, I've got his name, lovely guy, his manager's Jim. So and Jim was just so open next to me. I got an email from him saying, oh man, I love the backing track. The guy passed it on to me. In fact, it's so good. It's so good for the minds. Do you want to write together? And I was like, next week he turns up, you know, he came down and he's in this tiny studio and he loved it. And I've got a song on the last Simple Minds album, Big Music, that did really well for them as well. And my Dark Flowers little project signed to Low Jinks, which is a great indie little label. And it's a sort of alt country album, but with electronica. And I sat here and read Sam Shepard's book, Motel Chronicles, which I was obsessed with. And I listened to an album called The Hired Hand by Bruce Langhorne, which was an instrumental album from a film, a cowboy film, but it had all found sound and wind and out of tune, weird stuff. And so 7 years ago, I thought I'd love to combine the words from Motel Chronicles to this sort of music, but put a bit of Another Green World in there as well.
Yes.
Country and electronics and this prose. And then Jim heard it and he said, that quote, and I sent every single little quotes from the book and a backing track, and he came and did 4 songs on it. And I got, all I ever wanted to do was get a Mojo review for it. I thought, can I take my idea and in a year's time or 2 years' time get a great review in Mojo? I did. I got a 4-star review, and Peter Murphy did a track on it, and Jim Kerr did 3, and Dot Allison from Massive Attack did 1, and Kate Havnevik, this gorgeous Norwegian electronic artist, did a track, and Shelley Poole, who I love, was in Alicia's Attic, and has become a great mate of mine, and who also writes a lot for other people, and Helicopter Girl, who I'd been introduced to by Rob Dickens, and I produced her 2nd album and her 3rd album for her.
Blimey.
I put this whole album together, and 8 different vocalists, and Mojo, both Q, Mojo and Rolling Stone gave it an amazing review. So I've finished the 2nd album 7 years later, and because of COVID, Low Jinks can't release it just yet. They're financially not in a good place, so they suggested, why don't you do an EP of covers? So I've done a Murder Ballads EP, and I've kept pretty. Jim Kerr didn't do it, but he's got 4 songs on the new album, so he didn't want to overload. But I've got Gabriella Chilmi, who's got a voice so similar to Helicopter Girl. Helicopter Girl freaked out, went missing in action. She had a lot of issues, but Gabriella just slipped in, and she's, you know, Nothing Sweet About Me was a huge hit single for her, but she's an incredibly dark lyricist. She's not that. She's so much more than that. She's a beautiful dark country singer, and she looks beautiful, and she mines really great lyrics. And so Gabrielle has done Delta Ray's Bottom of the River. David J, who I'd met via Peter Murphy. So I'm not going back to Peter for the Dark Flowers, because he caused me such a runaround for doing 1 track on 1 album, asking for 10,000 quid. You know, I was like, mate, the album I'm doing in my bedroom. I've done 7 albums with you for nothing. You know, we remain great friends, but you know the story why we fell out, and you want $10,000. So I met Dave, and Dave is very agreeable. I still love working with Peter, but David's a different writer, different style. David collaborates in the old-fashioned way of collaboration. Peter Murphy takes what you've done, takes it away, and makes it into something great.
Right.
That's a different thing than a kind of sharing backwards and forwards of ideas.
Yeah.
And I think David jumped on it straight away, and he wrote a track for the album, for the 2nd album, called The Stars Standing, which is he totally got the vibe of the Motel Chronicles, which I don't think Pete really got. Pete just put some great vocals on the first album, but David really gets the Americana aspect of it.
Yeah, did you?
And then Lloyd Cole, of all people, emailed me. I was so pissed off about this. He'd heard the first album and said, "Are you doing a 2nd?" And I said, yeah, and I sent him and I started this really long. Lloyd Cole's another hero of mine. I remember in the mining village going into the local barbers and taking the picture of Lloyd Cole's album, saying, I want that haircut like that. I want to look like Lloyd Cole.
We
He's a
all
huge
do.
fan of Lloyd Cole and the Commotions. I met him in a bar in Tokyo with the 100 Men when we were out on one of our, and he was equally a nice guy, from a northern guy from Derbyshire, close to where I'm from actually, and Lloyd Cole said he would love to do a track for the new Dark Flowers album, and I sent him a load of backing tracks, and he loved one, and he said, I've got a great title called Salt Flats, and then communication just dwindled away, and he was like, my studio's not working, and this is I can't do that. I just thought, I've lost. You know when you've lost the dressing room,
Yes.
and that moment had come, gone, and I would have loved. And then David J said, I'm in New York. Give me Lloyd Cole's email, and I did. And Dave said, oh yeah, I went and met him in a bar, and we had a great time. We drank loads of beer and whiskey, and I thought, fucking hell, what am I, a personal dating agency? I get nothing out of it.
Yes. I know that was
But yeah, so Catherine A.D., known as the Anchoress, who is great, just released an album with Bernard Butler from Suede, and she's the new indie darling. But Catherine sang on the first Dark Flowers album as well, and I got her the gig joining Simple Minds, so she joined Simple Minds as a keyboard player, and then promptly left last year. But there's a gorgeous duet with her and Jim called Indian Summer, and as the Anchoress, she's getting a lot of support from Six Radio and Press, Guardian, The Telegraph. Her new album is great. It's really good. And Catherine has done a version of Tom Waits' Dead and Lovely. So I've got David J, Catherine A.D. as the Anchoress, Gabriella Chilmy, and the lovely Shelley Poole, who has done Joan Baez's Silver Dagger.
bloody hell. That's one amazing, because is his name Martin Atkins, who's got various things. He's a drummer. He worked with Ministry and bands like that, but he seems to have these amazing projects where he works with so many different people to put albums together. You're quite similar to that, aren't you?
I chance my arm a lot. I used the Dido connection, the one-off hit that I had, which is actually pure luck. Anybody could have written those chords and got on that album. And Peter Murphy carries a hell of a lot of kudos. As Peter Murphy's career has continued, his legend has by far eclipsed his output in a strange way. Trent Reznor loves him, and Peter, I love-hate relationship with him. We fall out, but I'll be eternally grateful to him. And as a front man, I've never worked with anybody who had the charisma that he had on stage. So the Peter Murphy and the Dido thing together often is an intriguing prospect for people to co-write with.
Yes, well, I would imagine actually. And do you get approached much, by some random people as well?
No, because I stopped being managed by people, and I've took a very low profile at Warner Chappell's, almost hiding amongst all those hundreds of other writers. And in order to basically, what happened as well was about 8 years ago, again, my northern desire for security kicked in, and I took a job. I went to a university, to Solent University. I'd heard about that songwriting was actually becoming a university subject. So I arranged an interview with a great guy called Paul Rutter, who was head of music at Solent. And I said, look, this is what I've done. Is immediately, come and meet me. So I said, I don't want a job. I don't want to work here. I don't want anything. I just want to know about this idea of songwriting as an academic subject.
Yes.
And he said, look, a friend of mine, Andy West, is running a Bath Spa's first ever MA songwriting. So I went, trundled down to Bath Spa, met Andy. He's like, well, stay. So I stayed. I did a little talk in the class. They said, come back next week. And I started doing that every week. And then I was on the course. And I went back to Solent, and Paul Rutt said, did you meet Andy? I said, yeah, I've done it for a year. It's like, bloody hell, why didn't you do it here? I said, well, you didn't ask. So he said, come and do a lecture. So I did, and it went so well. I basically just talked about the people I'd worked with. Yeah. And then he said, he left and said, look, I've got to get you here. Do you want a job? Just one day a week, just come every Friday and do the songwriting units. And I've since grown them from like 15 people to now there's almost 60. There's 60 people in my class now. Mm-hmm. And then BIM heard about that and said, look, we'd love to get you involved. We need lecturers, and you've got this great CV. This is fantastic. And now you've been teaching at Solent. Do you want to come and do something for us? And so I now do 1 day a week at BIM, 1 day a week at Solent. Have my Dark Flowers project. I have my co-writes through friends that I know, like Jim and people like that. People that I respect and I love to work with. I try and get in touch with them, and sometimes it works. Warner's occasionally send new songwriters to me, so I occasionally get something from them that that is great, a new young artist or something like that. And this thing with Magnus, a couple of years ago, I got back in touch with Magnus Fines because Magnus produced a lot of stuff as well, and he's a total maverick figure. He's so charismatic, drawn to him immediately. I always wanted to work with him. It's just such good fun. We're a bit party animals ish, and he lived out in LA. And I thought, I really need to get a bit of this LA vibe. So I rang Magnus about 4 years ago. I said, "Look, mate, I haven't spoke to you for years. What about we do? I'm thinking of a new musical project, something that crosses like Kraftwerk and Daft Punk and maybe LCD Sound System." And he was like doing Death in Paradise and big now, scored a lot of films, music for his brother's films and stuff. And Magnus' enthusiasm for anything is infectious. He's like, I am so into this. Deep Machines was born. I flew over there, spent a month there, and the last state of play, we had Clem Burke on drums and this amazing live band. Then we ditched that. Then Magnus flew to Jamaica, and we got Sly and Robbie playing on 2 tracks now. So it's this kind of dub, electro, crazy stuff that we've yet to release anything. But we are determined this year to put stuff out. It's kicking. It's the most darkest electro, punk, weird. It's got a huge concept to it about the Deep Machine and...
Well, that's amazing because I interviewed Sly very recently because they've got a new album out. He was in Jamaica and it was great because I used to go and see the Taxi Gang a lot. When they used to do all the 3-hour taxi, those 3-hour gigs with various different frontmen.
Magnus also managed to get the sax player who plays on all their recordings to play on it as well. So we've got the Jamaican brass band, like a Jamaican funeral march is playing, and we've got Sly and Robbie drumming. Then we're rapping over it. I'm actually using my own vocals with Magnus, but with tons of electronica. I'll have to send you.
Yes, well, that would be amazing. But I did an interview with a woman called Mona Muir, who was a German from the 80s, and she got really into doing sort of music for games. She said that was such a big game. That
was a big. A lot of people were earning a lot of money from that. I'm just going to text Magnus back saying what I'm doing because he's just.
Yeah.
Just let him know.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's send that. Cool.
Yeah. So was that ever a world that you were sort of tempted in the world of making?
Well, funnily enough, everything you asked, I've got a story. I was approached by a company called Commercial Music just after I'd started working with Peter Murphy, and they mistakenly put an advert in Melody Maker when it should have gone in a trade paper, and it was musician for something needed, and I answered it. I was so desperate, and it was a guy called Paul Amanda and Charlie Nelson. Formed this company called Commercial Music. Paul and Manda went on to form the Beatmasters.
Right.
Big hits with Betty Boo, who I then met Betty Boo and was going to write with Alison Clarkson, and in the end I started writing with Shelley Poole. I met 2 writers on the same day. But yeah, I did this commercial for them for whipped cream, strawberries and cream, and chocolate shakes and cream for the Milk Marketing Board, and it went huge. And my mum loved it, my dad loved it. It was on Channel 4, and I got paid a load of money for it. And it was in the cinema as well, so I go to the cinema, and again, it was just fluke. I just came up with this riff in the studio, and they thought, this guy's really good. Then they asked me to do another one. I went back. It was in Wardour Street. And it's got this. I was on this Emacs, and this kind of guy turned up, and it was the advertising day, and he actually did have the big red rimmed glasses and the braces, like a real advertising cock.
Yes.
And he starts going, "Oh no, you need to play it like this." And then Paul, one of the commercial musicians, said, "What's wrong with you? You know, this is serious. You're not taking this serious." I thought, "What the fucking hell, man? I just walked in your studio a month ago. I didn't want this." And I looked out the window and I saw the pub. And I went, "Oh," and he went, "You're not going to the pub. You stay until you finish this." And at that point, I went, "Tell you one thing I am doing. I am fucking going to the pub right now. You can stick this fucking job, mate." And that was the end of my commercial music career. So I kind of had a brief amount of success, then realised actually, you know, it was just a bit of fluke. A few things came together and it sounded right on the advert, but I'm not into getting my head down and doing this music to order. For people like him to, you know, executives turning up and saying, "Do this, do that." It's like, no, this is the road to purgatory here.
Yes, it was going to end in tears. And what's it like with, you know, Shelley Paul, who was in Alicia's Attic? Because obviously she had that experience of doing probably 2 albums. I can remember the first one.
Shelley is my best female friend. I was only talking to her last night, and I was a bit down with the whole COVID thing, and because we were supposed to do a songwriting retreat together as mentors in the Scottish Highlands at Knoydart, Knoydart, the Knoydart Songwriting Festival, with just the two of us. And another guy is doing it, is an indie guy, Justin Curry from Delamitri, I think, was going to do one of them, and Boo Hewardine is doing one.
Oh, Boo, yes.
And we were supposed to do it on my birthday, my 60th birthday, June the 17th, and it was cancelled due to COVID. We still can't get the go-ahead for people to mix by June the 17th. I think that the English logistics is June the 21st. It might happen, but they still couldn't take the risk. So I was talking to Shelley about it last night. She was just like, "Look," and she went online and she booked a cottage in Scotland for us. I said, "We're going anyway."
Excellent.
So, Shelley is absolutely wonderful. She's my favourite female songwriter. She's so left field in her approach still. She has an amazing alt country band called Red Sky July. I met Shelley because I co-produced and co-wrote her first solo album, Hard Time for the Dreamers, here, and I loved it. And I thought, I love working with this girl so much. And then we started playing it live, so I was able to just get the guitar. And then her husband, Ali McElwain, is in Texas, the band Texas. So I got on with Ali really well as well. So the three of us were just such a great three people, just sit and play and listen to folk and country. And it's just, you know, and she's a great songwriter for other people, Shelley. Her sister Karen did extremely well, embraced the whole commercial aspect and wrote a lot of Shapeshifters and Kylie, and now she does a ton of stuff for K-pop. She's a big cheese in K-pop, Karen Poole is. She's regularly flown over to South Korea and paid large amounts of money, and Shelley minds a more left field path. She writes with a lot of alt country artists, and we always write stuff. And the Dark Flowers thing, she was so natural for it. She's done 3 songs on the last album, 3 songs on the new, and we're doing another project. I've started another project on the North Sea, which is going to be another thing I started my own record label called Loki Records.
Blimey, that's quite a brave thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not a lot, but just to release the music that I did in installations and stuff.
Right.
And then I started to put the B-movie stuff out through it as well. And I'm doing the Dark Flowers Murder Bars EP through it as well. And I re-released Shelley's album, Hard Time for the Dreamers, re-released it last year through it. It doesn't sell anything, hardly anything, but it's so nice to have what you've always wanted, is your own little label. It's just a website and DistroKid, you know, and maybe I press up CDs. But all these things are fantastic. But it's still just spinning plates, you know, trying to keep everything going. I don't know where it's going to end, but the uni thing is fantastic for bringing in a little bit of a solid income. The Dido royalties and Peter Murphy royalties are not the same, but it's a relatively fallback.
Yes.
You know, you can also pay your mortgage and afford a tin of beans, but you might not be able to go on holiday. But
Yes,
I
I know.
don't mind. Then I'll do some extra marking if you want to do that, or
So is it, because I remember sort of just as COVID hit last year, Hank Wangford had just brought his album out and it was like he was really down. And I said, what's it like, now that you've got this time that everyone's kind of wanted, and then suddenly you've been given it, and he's like, I'm not feeling good. I'm feeling a bit depressed. How's it been for you creatively? I mean, it sounds
terrible.
like
Realistically terrible, because having all these projects on the go, a lot of these ideas are what were percolating years ago, and I thought COVID absolutely fantastic. I don't have to go to Southampton. I don't have to go into BIM. I'm going to be studio bound. I haven't even restrung my guitar in a year. It's like I never really thought, so stupid. I never really thought of myself as creative. I just always thought of myself as lucky. Oh, you've been so lucky, you. I've been so lucky to, and then I realised that actually you are. Oh, I am. I am quite a creative person, and I've only just realised it at nearly 60. And the COVID thing sucked the creativity out of me, and I don't know why, but I just couldn't write music. It's like anybody can write music. Pick up your guitar, yeah, do this. Wasn't interested. And all the plans, and you can finish this, and it went out the window. It's only in the last month that I thought you need to get this Dark Flowers thing out, this EP. And the minute I set a deadline and put it on Spotify for March the 19th was when I thought you've got to kind of really start making videos, start mixing things, start doing this. And now I'm starting to feel it again. I'm starting to feel totally creative again, and I can't wait for the uni work to finish now in April, so I can.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Is it the case that you're going to miss actually meeting, like, Peter Bonas or whoever, and just
Yeah,
being able to jam with and say, let's have a.
yeah, all of that thing that you somehow think that you're so self-contained that everything comes from inside you. Then you finally realize actually that's the myth, that a lot of the creativity is by being around inspirational people, even if you're just talking music.
Yeah,
Even if you're just sharing a joke, even if you're just playing each other's songs, even if you go for a drink with somebody that's non-music related but they're musicians, you come back in a good mood. You've picked something up, you want to create. When you take all of that away and you're just left to your own devices, you suddenly realise you're not Prince and you're not 19. And shit, no man is an island.
yeah.
There is that feeling that it's just boring.
Yes, just having something on the calendar that gets cancelled is quite hard going, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's,
And the uni thing sucks the life out of you as well, even though it pays, the lesson plans that you have to do. Just takes it back to what we first started about, the lesson plans and the planning and the welfare of the students that you love, organising additional one-to-ones for them because they're down, and you want to talk them through their assessment more. You want to say, look, Tuesday morning I'll do 3 hours of one-to-one for you. You think, well, that's your Tuesday of music gone.
yes.
And then BIM going, oh, can you do auditions for us, the live auditions for some? It's all on Zoom now, so we're not just going to do it on the Saturday where you turn up, come to BIM in Fulham, and then you go for a drink afterwards. It's all day sat in front of Zoom, Wednesdays, then Saturdays, then Fridays at Solent, then Mondays at BIM, Tuesday mornings at BIM. It's like first time in your life you've really have overstretched your time,
Yeah.
and it makes me really angry. Makes me angry at myself and other people have to bear the brunt of it. But it's actually a bit, financially, fucking hell, I have not suffered at all through the COVID thing. I've earned more money than I've ever earned by just taking on additional marking. I work for this thing called the Songwriting Academy. Because I'm at home and I've got Zoom, I think, well, you might as well do it. Oh, it's just do it Friday night, do it Wednesday night, do it this night, and then I'm not spending any money travelling. I'm not gone out to LA and spent £3,000 on that. I've not bought any new equipment because no shops are open. It's just like, you know, earning money with nowhere to spend it has been a fucking godsend, really. Because I've saved up money for the first time ever. So when this is all over, I aim to put my travelling shoes on and
get to Vegas.
Yeah. Yes, I will be back out into Nevada to record more sound for the Dark Flowers. I'm going to have to push off because I have to put some food in.
Look, so okay, briefly, if you were and you almost answered it, really, if you were able to sort of, or could have told your 16 or 18-year-old self, you know, some sort of information or words of wisdom that obviously you've now developed or gained over the decades, I mean, was there a few things that you'd have said, yeah, just look out for that, mate, or just remember to do that, even if, you know, you're not that keen on it?
I would say sometimes please take it seriously. Everything isn't, you know, I've missed a lot of opportunities by either not taking it seriously, having that northern attitude, oh fuck it attitude, you know. Sometimes I would say pay a little bit more attention to what's going on around you, because there's a lot going on around you. And when you're young, you don't spot it, or you choose to ignore it. And there's good things going on around you, and there's bad things going on around you. So, you know, keep listening a little more.
Yes. Well, look, I'll let you go, but this has been amazing. Thank you ever so much, Paul, for this.
If you have any more questions, Dave, just drop me an email, or you say, I want to clear this up, you want to do another quick one of these, a 20-minute thing to just say, look, these are the points I want to clear. If you want to do anything like that, just drop your line. I'm around. I'm here, you know. And I'll make a playlist of some of the newer material I'm doing.
Yeah. So have you got that on Spotify or Bandcamp?
No, that's released stuff. The Dark Flowers stuff is on Spotify. The first album, Radioland, is on Spotify.
Excellent.
The latest B-movie releases, a couple of them on Spotify, but the new track I'll send you that I've just finished, I just finished it today. It's a post-punk prog epic. I played everything on it because we haven't been able to use any of the other members of the band, so I'm really pleased with that. And I'll send you the link to the Dark Flowers new EP.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, well, look, I'll let you go, though. It's Sunday evening. But look, thank you ever so much, and take care.
Now I'm going to have to jump on a bloody call to Magnus now in LA, and he waffles on for ages. I want my fish and rice as well.
Okay, well, take care. Thanks a lot.
Okay, lovely to meet up. As I say, just drop me an email, anything you want to clear, clarify, whatever. Okay. No problem.
Take care. Right. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
I'll see you soon.
See you.
Bye.
And that was me in conversation with Paul Statham, finding out about life in music. It's an interesting world. Anyway, a massive thank you to Paul for giving me the time for that interview. This has been David Eastaugh, the C86 Show. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. It's all there. Keep it positive, though, and nice. And, yes, also, all these have been archived. You can find those on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Have a great week. Stay safe. Thank you.